Earlier, I spoke with Grant Kimberley. He is the Director of Market Development at the Iowa Soybean Association. As it turns out, his family has a bit of history with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
President Xi Jinping visited Iowa for the second time, actually, in 2012, right before he became president, when he was still vice president. And he came to visit his old friend, former Iowa Governor Terry Branstad, who now is the U.S. ambassador to China. And when he came here, he wanted to visit a farm because that was a key important memory that he had when he visited the first time in 1985. For whatever reason, our farm was chosen as the host site for that visit. And so he came to our farm in 2012, and it was a very good experience. We got a chance to spend time with him, with my father and my mother and my wife, and along with Governor Branstad, Lieutenant Governor Reynolds, USDA Secretary Vilsack, and of course many other Chinese provincial leaders and Ministry of Agriculture and Commerce leaders at the time, and they came into our house in our living room. So it was almost a little bit surreal, spending time talking about agriculture and trade, and then we went outside and toured the farmstead and looked at the machinery and equipment and talked about the importance of technology and how we utilize that to be efficient producers of food for the world.
China buys 40% of soybeans grown in the U.S. It makes China the soybean farmer's biggest buyer. So as we hear all this saber rattling going back and forth of a possible trade war, any fears that somebody who hosted Xi Jinping might end up being a casualty?
Certainly, we've been all along as the soybean industry expressing our concerns to both the White House and the U.S. administration, as well as to our Chinese counterparts and the government and the industry folks in China. Now, keep in mind, the U.S. soybean industry has a long-standing relationship with China. We've been working in China as an industry for 35 years. When we first established our market presence over there in an office. So we have a lot of good relationships in China. We worked with the industry over many, many years to grow their livestock industry, help them modernize, help them be more efficient. That's provided more market opportunities for U.S. soybean farmers. So we don't want to jeopardize that work, and that's a message that we've been conveying to both sides, because ultimately nobody wins in a trade war. And so we want to make sure that this can get resolved quickly. Both sides have legitimate concerns, we understand, that need to be addressed, but we want these to be addressed quickly.
And Grant, you already mentioned the Chinese president visited your farm. You talked about the fact that there's this close relationship between President Xi and former Governor Terry Branstad. Now he's the ambassador to China. Iowa voted for Trump in the last election. So if you were to look at things, it looks as though all the planets are aligned in such a way that Iowa should be on top of the world. And right now, it looks like you could be actually in the middle of this whole thing. Do you see the irony in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern for us, but I also am optimistic because of that relationship. Ambassador Branstad is the right man for the job. He has a very good relationship, I think, with all parties involved. I know the Chinese government and especially President Xi highly respect him and listen to him. And I know that President Trump respects Ambassador Branstad and listens to him. Now, both administrations, both governments have their perspectives, but I think with Ambassador Branstad at least being able to be the conduit and the communication link between both sides, I think that bodes well that hopefully this will be resolved sooner than later. And quite frankly, nothing has really happened yet. There's just been proposals. So I'm hopeful that both sides will come to the table, think through this whole thing logically, and come up with a win-win compromise that works well for both countries.
Grant Kimberley speaking to us from Iowa earlier today.